Hello! In this lesson, I'll show you how the F number is linked to the exposure time. I'm going to initialize an interactive render in order to see the effect produced by the changes in real time. Let's move the window sideways to keep our workspace visible. In this way, we'll create a new frame with an object in the foreground and the other one in the background. Let's play with these two elements to create a depth of field effect. Then go to the camera we've already created and start working from here. The first thing we should do is to activate the depth of field by clicking on this slide bar. As you can see, nothing is actually happening yet. This happens because when the camera lens has an aperture of 8, which we set before in our scene, the depth of field is so large that practically everything seems to be focused. There is probably a slight effect, but it's completely imperceptible. We can reduce the depth of field by changing any of these three elements. 1. Distance from the objects, or zoom. 2. Focal length, or field of view in SketchUp. 3. F, or aperture. In fact, you'll notice that by changing the F number, you'll really perceive in a clearer and more precise way the effect that our frame gets. Let's set a value of 2 here, and we'll study why our exposure has changed completely later. I'm going to show you 2 options for creating the depth of field in an effective way. The first option is that if you put attention here, you'll see that we've been working with the advanced options of the camera so far. When you click on these arrows, our camera's options will be simplified. This means that vray will work with the exposure value, EV, activated. Having said that, this option calibrates the camera so as the depth of field will be visible to our liking and the exposure keeps the constant and linear. It uses the location of our focus point and by giving a value in the defocus slot. This signifies that the F number and the exposure will be automatically adjusted to see the effect we want. Defocus is a tool that basically simulates a plane from which we'll start to focus or defocus our objects. Its accuracy will depend on where we position our focal point. If we change a value close to 1, the maximum, everything will be practically in focus. But if we decrease the value, we'll get a more realistic appearance. In simplest words, it's our focus range. .35 seems to work fine. The focus distance is expressed in centimetres in this case. You'll see that if we change the focal point, everything will keep calibrated and the camera will be fixed according to what we want. The second option is the recommended by the 5SRW method, and we will have more control and awareness of the relationship between the ISO, F number and shutter speed. Once we go back to the advanced options in camera, you'll notice the values are very different from those we have studied so far. We'll set these values we had by default earlier and start again. As you can see, the area in focus is the chair, but the amount of light captured by our camera has increased considerably. This happens because a large aperture, which corresponds to a low value, reduces the depth of field, and at the same time it allows more incoming light. That's the reason why we need to compensate this increase in brightness by decreasing the exposure time. There's a mathematical relationship between the aperture and the exposure time, which can be easily calculated by using the spreadsheet available for download below this video. In this area we have the values by default of the vray camera, f number equals 8, shutter speed 200 and the ISO 100. Let's set our spreadsheet using the same values we used in our scene, that is 50, with f8 and a shutter speed of 50 I get a specified exposure. If I change the f number to 2, which shutter speed value will I need to keep the constant exposure? We just need to put 2 in this box and we have the result, 800. So, with a f number of 8 and a shutter speed of 50, we get the same exposure we achieved with f number 2 and a shutter speed of 800. The only thing that changes is the depth of field. Let's set the shutter speed to 800 here, and now everything has returned to normal as before. I wanted to use this spreadsheet to show you the way it works, to give a global idea of this principle, but in fact this is something you can do easily by eye. I'm going to change the focal point to the vase, and in this way we won't affect the starting frame. And manually we adjust the shutter speed to see the process immediately and in real time from one value to another until we get the approximated final result. Whether you use a spreadsheet or do it by eye, the result will always be the same.